Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with John Fenick. In today's interview, we discuss the gold market. We discuss the idea of the president trying to fire the Fed chairman. We also get into some of the majors' earnings and how they are now generating massive cash flow. And John discusses some of the junior names that he currently holds. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. John, it's good to see you again.
Hey, you too, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So let's start off talking about the gold market. We're sitting above $3,300 at the time of filming. It's been quite the year, I think is one way to put it. What's going through your mind right now when you look at the gold market? You think that this is sustainable? You think we're going higher? What's going through your head?
So we had pointed out on your show the last time that the big banks, meaning Citi, Bank of America, Goldman, all those names that we're talking December, January timeframe of 3,000 gold was really bullish, right? And a lot of people were kind of against that theory, the contrarian types, right? Saying, well, this means that we're at a top, which is total BS. Obviously, now you can see that in the price action. It means that the big banks have influence, right? And when they put that out there, it can only help gold's narrative. Since you and I last met, UBS has now upped their target from 3,000 to 3,200. Goldman upped their target to 3,700, which is insane. Bank of America, I think, is at 3,500 now. And I'm pretty sure I saw something on JP Morgan out there close to 4,000 for next year, which is unreal considering that JP Morgan was fined for manipulation in precious metals many times over the years I used to work there, right? So like it's like these kind of companies coming to the table and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, we were wrong," is very bullish, and so you're seeing price action start to catch up to that. But it's more than that. It's this tariff, kind of back and forth that started April 2nd in a more meaningful way with Trump and pretty much everyone in the world. That's helping gold as well. And gold loves uncertainty and fear. And that's what you saw the first, 5, 7 trading sessions after April 2nd, right? Apple, which is the largest tech name in households, I would argue, AAPL, down 23% in 5 days, right? And so that's the kind of danger, that we have, Steve, in this market of the average investor performance is different than investment performance, right? When you look at how Apple does in a year like 2025, that might just be a blip in the year. Hopefully it is. Probably not, though. You're going to see a lot of up and down in some of these names this year. And how did you handle that as an investor? What's your risk tolerance, right? When you were down 12, 15, 20, where did you bail if you bailed? Because I would argue a lot of people probably did bail by day 5. Some of these guys are on margin. They have to bail, right? Now the stock's right back to where it was. It's like nothing happened, right? It's just crazy price action, and you have to kind of pick a side here as an investor. Do I want to continue to chase momentum, which has worked for me for many, many years in a row? Or do I see a new paradigm developing and I've got to get on board with that?
So one of the big things that I think everybody's talking about is this. Uh, I guess we could call it a tiff, maybe a little bit of a spat that happened between President Trump and Jerome Powell, where Trump was saying, "Okay, I'm going to fire him if he doesn't start to um, meet my demands," and then Powell said he wasn't going to leave, and then like a week later, it turned into Trump maybe acting a little bit like he had kind of had a come to Jesus moment, if you will, about the idea of actually firing a Fed chairman. What do you think's happening there? What's is there anything that really we can learn from this? Is you think it's over? What's your view on what happened there?
My view is that Trump is serious about getting rid of Powell, and this most recent walk back of that narrative is just a way to support broad markets, right? Like if you look at April 21st or 22nd when Trump said this, the market loved it, and the broad market went up huge, right? If you look at April 21st or 25 on the S&P, S&P is up over 4% in that week, right? That's a meaningful week. But it was getting really dicey right before that comment. If you look at the S&P, like, it was right on, I don't think it was right on support, but it was getting close to support. And then, hey, someone comes to the rescue as usual. But I would argue this, right? May 7th is your, as you put it, come to Jesus moment. That's when the Fed actually says something meaningful about interest rates. And I am in the camp that they're going to say nothing that represents a cut May 7th. So what happens May 8th? I think Trump goes right after Powell again. And broad markets are not going to like A, that they didn't get their cut, or B, that Trump is now coming after Powell once again. So we have to look at June 18th, I think, the next meeting, Steve, to get a better picture as to how this plays out. And right now, as we sit here, the CME Fed Watch Tool website is showing a quarter point cut on June 18th, not 50, which is what everyone seems to be factoring in. So what I see is sort of a market that's doing like this. It's like, hope is not a strategy, as I always say. Like, you have to be able to have a game plan in place and say, what happens if this scenario doesn't play out, right? What's my downside risk?
So it's been an interesting earnings season. We're starting to see some of the upward movement in the price of gold get reflected in some of the major producers, whether we're talking about Newmont, Agnico Eagle, Barrick, you name it. What's your thoughts right now on earnings season, and who do you like?
Well, Newmont came out as the leader April 23 and had a decent quarter. Stock responded, was up over 2-3%, I think, that first day following, and has now faded back to right around the price it was the day before the 23rd, right? So, like, you're not seeing follow through, which is not really bullish, but Agnico followed that the day after with what I consider even a better report, reporting, all-in sustaining costs of under 1,200 an ounce, just killing it. And their chart reflects that, right? That's AEM. Um, that said, our cost on AEM is around 45 and a half. So, I mean, we did sell a little bit around 111 recently, because my job, in the way I see it, is investors follow my picks. And so I need to make people money, right? I'm not going to just buy and hold for 5 years. I'm going to trade along the way. We did this with Vino Silver recently too. We bought it at 53 cent average cost. We just dumped all of it last week between $1.92 and $2. So, like, I mean, yeah, it's up from where I dumped it. Fine with that. When you're up 300+%, you never, can argue about that. So, um, I think the producing kind of names like we just talked about, Steve, are going to continue to get love. And so other names in GDX and GDXJ, as they report earnings, I expect some pretty good things coming in April and May. And I think that will just help our sector as we move forward, because what's happened now is that gold has clearly led this rally, right? Silver is still lagging terribly. That doesn't mean we've reduced our silver position. We just continue to add to it on dips. Like when we dipped below $30 recently, we added it right at 30, and we added again right at around 31 and a half. And now we're in the 32s, right? I firmly believe we're going to test 35 on silver this year, even though we failed there recently. I think we test it again this year and we break through 35, and then there's not a ton of resistance all the way to 50. You've got a couple of spots to worry about, like 37 and 40. But I mean, you've got a nice path to 50 by next year, which is huge if you're investing in this sector. I mean, silver at 32 today to 50 is a really nice return. But think about silver juniors or silver mid tiers at $50 silver. It's insane.
It's funny because if you told me, say 3 years ago, that gold would be at 3,300 and asked me to tell you what the price of silver would be, I'd definitely be saying north of $45. Would you agree with
I
that?
would have absolutely said, yeah, somewhere between 37 and 50. There's no question. I agree. It's super frustrating. It is the most frustrating commodity out there, bar none.
So I got to ask you the standard question that I'm sure you get asked when you go on any of these types of shows, which is, when are we going to start to see capital flow into the junior names? I know that it's typically gets set off by a bunch of M&A where people who own companies of those second and third tier companies suddenly find themselves with cash and then they move along the risk curve. But in your opinion, when does that actually get set off, and when do we start to see sparks fly in the junior space?
Well, you're asking someone with a reasonably small social life, and I look at the screen 12 hours a day, and I'm starting to see a lot of bids show up on some names that I've put money into last year, thinking, okay, this is going to move faster than it did, but now they're starting to move. One example would be America's Gold and Silver. USAS came out with really good news recently, and I'm seeing some real buying in the stock now. It's getting a little frothy at 64-ish kind of US, but I mean, beautiful looking chart on a 1 and 2 year basis. And we've got Eric Sprott and some other people that came in. They got rid of the CEO and got a new person in there. So it's like stocks like that are kind of like turnaround situations, right? And you're starting to see capital get on board with that. It's just amazing to me, Steve, how long it takes, right? Like as an investor, you think, okay, like I can see this because I look at this every day. But the average buyer out there, it might take weeks for them to clam onto this, which is awesome for us, in that we have a better understanding of the sector. But I would just encourage your listeners to hold in there, right? Keep fact checking yourself. You don't have to do it weekly, but maybe monthly on, why did I buy this stock? Are they delivering like I thought they would? And if not, it's time to sell. I mean, you have to have a discipline. But if they're kind of doing what they said they were going to do, let it ride because gold and silver are in an uptrend, right? Gold is in a clear uptrend. Silver is still not like doing badly. I mean, we were interviewing this time last year, it was probably 25, 26, right? It's like, it is up nicely and it's going to catch up to gold eventually, but anytime you get a gold to silver ratio of 100 plus, I mean, it's time to start looking at silver again. And so, we continue to buy that physical on dips and nibble on stocks like the one we just talked about on the way up. And then at some point, when the RSI gets stretched on these names, we sell maybe a third or half of our position because it's just, we have to make money for people. That's the name of the game.
So I gotta sneak in a question here for you about if there's any junior names that you are particularly bullish on. I know at your conference, which I'll ask about in a few minutes. I see Power Metallic's going to be there. We've had Terry on a bunch of times. One of the biggest wins I've had in the last few years is well, Power Nickel that turned into Power Metallic. That's been an absolute rock star stock in the junior mining world. One name that I got to speak with at your event that I really did fall in love with was Goliath Resources with Roger Rasmus. I thought that I mean, since then they've hit some phenomenal drill holes that I think really people should take a look at. We came out and did some content talking about how it looks to us like the next Great Bear. Um, Another name that really caught my eye there was, I think they were called 1911 Gold. On paper, they look very attractive, but it's one of those. They've got the mill set up. They've got some high grade property, but you think about it for a second, and it's like, well, they still got to raise a bunch of money, and how big is that dilution risk right now? So, anyways, I know I just threw like three different names at you, and there's probably some other names you want to get into. But what's going through your head when you think about junior names that you like right now?
So I love Terry Lynch as a leader, and really happy to see him have success at his project. Nisk, just killing it on these copper drill holes last year. This, just a few months ago, as you know, he raised 40 plus million Canadian, which is insane. Given that when I met him through Eric Sprott about 18 months earlier, they were struggling to raise 2, 3, 4 million at a clip, right? So like this is exactly what you want to see from a junior, attracting more money from a billionaire like Rob McEwen, attracting more money from Robert Friedland in round two now. These are like serious players in our sector, right? So if they're buying into a story like that, as a client, that's a really good indication that people like that made their money in this sector. They're not, I'm not saying follow them into every name, but I'm saying, that checks a box for us, right? And then you start looking at the geology. This is a the reason for the name change from Power Nickel to Power Metallic recently, and the ticker is PNPN in Canada, PNPNF in the States. They haven't changed. The reason is because they want to show people, hey, we're polymetallic, right? This is not a nickel story only. We have a ton of copper hits. We've got platinum, we've got gold, we've got other things in the deposit. And polymetallic deposits are really exciting for us because there's a lot of ways to win. So I think Terry's doing everything he should do. The problem with the stock recently has been, they did a raise. There's going to be some selling after that 4 month and a day hold. Number one. Number two, there's going to be some gaming with the stock always because the shorts just have glammed onto the stock for whatever reason for the last year or two and play with it from time to time. But when you look at a chart, the way I look at it, Steve, is if let's say just arbitrarily the high was $1.30 US and we're trading at 90 cents US now. Do you think they have a good shot to get back to $1.30? Yeah, because that chart, is established now, right? They did a lot of volume at a buck 20, buck 30. So you look at that and say, that's my potential upside, right? Potential being the operative word. But then you look at the potential downside and you say, okay, if I'm wrong and I buy this at, it goes to 60 cents US and I lose a third of my money at 90, um, that's okay because Rob McEwen and Robert Friedland are in at that price, right? Like that's really comforting to know that these guys bought the stock right there. So we look at every name like this on a risk reward basis, just like this, right? So we have these kind of conversations about entry points and stuff, and we don't always get the entry point right on the first time, but we on a blended basis do quite well because we're very persistent on buying stuff, right? So the other names you mentioned, Goliath, we own a little bit of. I haven't talked to Roger in a while, but I mean, I love his style. He's just so aggressive. I mean, he raised money last year a couple of different times or back to back, and then just put it all in the ground. I mean, the guy's just pulling massive drill holes, and he's like a news machine. And so is Terry at Power Metallic. These guys both pepper the market with news every month, which investors love. And good for him. And then you mentioned 1911 gold. I've known Sean for about 2 years. The reason I got to meet Sean was through Don Durrett and Larry Leopard, actually, because Don and Larry, really love the stock. They said that's one of their top 25 gold picks for the next year or two. Um, the stock was at 11 cents Canadian, or sorry, 11 cents US when you and I met them last October at my conference at Four Seasons Fort Lauderdale. Stock hit 19 cents and hit resistance recently on good volume, and now is at 15 and a half US. So, I mean, again, like you buy pullbacks if you believe in the story. And to your point, they've got a high grade deposit and probably less than 2 years away from production. So those are the three you just mentioned. I'll give you a couple of others. So I just started to buy more Platinex, which is now called PTX Metals, and that one is PANXF in the States, PTX in Canada. I just bought more yesterday at 0.065 or even lower US. I mean, I don't even know how it's trading this low. It did a financing, and as you know, Steve, people will sell something, 4 months in a day and keep the warrant, and that's fine. But like, again, 3 or 4 different deposits. You've got a lot of ways to win with this stock. I just think in a gold bull market, when they have 2 gold deposits, like, if they are drilling right now, so if they hit anything in a hot coal market, that's interesting to me. There has been like a little bit of an iceberg out there around 9 US, but again, if I'm buying it at 6.5 and I hit an iceberg at 9 or 10, I'm never worried because again, I'm still up 25-30% from my original entry point. So there's some room to work with there. Let me think. I Geez, I've been all over the map with bias recently, but I really like Triumph Gold, which is TIGCF in the States and TIG in Canada. I've gotten to know John Anderson since January. I got referred to him by someone, I can't even recall who. And John, like you, I think you'd like John's style, Steve. He basically said, you know what, I wasn't going to market this company in 2022 to 2024 and dilute shareholders. I basically just put it on ice. And now with gold at 3,000 plus, I'm dusting it off and I'm going to market it. And that makes all the sense in the world, right? So you've got $2 million you just raised successfully. They're going to drill this summer. And again, like at 13 cents US, 14 cents US, like what's the risk? Like it's just, I mean, yeah, anything can go to zero. That's the risk, right? Like, let's be honest. But if it's being well managed and you look at the cap structure, I mean, 40% of the cap structure is owned by John, Michael Gentile, and a couple other guys. Like these guys are smart people that have majority control over the stock, right? So it's not going to get sold cheaply. That's another box that we check with every name that we buy. We don't like to see, CEOs that want to sell for a 20 or 30% premium. That's not interesting. We want to see guys like John that'll dig in and say, I want to hold this to see, 100, 200% tech gains over the next year or two when gold's hot.
All right. Well, John, let's wrap it up from here. If our audience wants more of your commentary, where can they go to?
Yeah, so feneckconsulting.com is our website. The performance tab will show our numbers through March 31st. We had a great first quarter. We were up almost 41%. And we're going to continue to plug away this year. This is my 10-year anniversary on my track record's coming up in this December. So I'm trying to grind as much as I can this year to put up a great 10-year number. And then, Steve, we're going to welcome you in the deep dive to our Florida conference, May 11th through the 13th in Fort Lauderdale. Anyone that lives in the Southeast that may be interested, my contact details will be in the show notes here. But you did a great job last year of interviewing some people on the floor. And we'll have a great lineup this year again. I mean, we've had to turn a lot of people away at that conference because it's the Four Seasons. I can't afford to bring everyone there. Um, but then right after that, we're going to Atlanta, May 14th through the 16th at the former Ritz-Carlton, which is now called the Whitley. And so Atlanta is a new one for us. We're going to do that right after Florida this year and have another, slew of companies there. And then I've been named a co-host of Stockholm, Sweden in October, which is going to be the Nordic Funds and Mines Conference. So it's John McCluskey and from Alamos and myself are the keynotes right now. There's going to be a lot of other people named as the year progresses. But yeah, interested in being in the conference business with gold over 3,000.
All right. Well, John, thanks very much for hopping on here today. And I will see you in May.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let us know what you think in the comment section. Thanks for watching, everyone.